And welcome everyone to my talk. I'm excited to talk about the emerging cybercrimes we've been studying. Imagine two people wants to shop online and buy boots. One of the people would choose the website on the right to buy the item, but the other person will go with the website on left. And one will receive the item that we have actually paid for, but the other won't. Which of these websites do you think is a scam? The one on left is a fraudulent online shopping website and will never send anything that you paid for. It turns out that this is actually a big problem, and authorities have been warning us for years. And in the figure, we can see the amount of monetary loss that users reported to FTC. As we dig deeper, we realize it's not just online shopping websites. The fake websites would be pet scam, like the websites that make users attached to pets that doesn't exist and make them pay for it, but they won't receive any pets. Or they could be fake cryptocurrency websites. And more other categories. We call all these websites fraudulent e-commerce websites and define it as where the attacker steals the money for bogus goods. What's the difference between this website and phishing is we all know what phishing is. In phishing, attackers steal users' sensitive information and using it later for monetization purposes. So the monetization goal is different with phishing. The other difference is that unlike phishing in fraudulent e-commerce websites, they don't try to impersonate well-known brands. And we actually think one of the reasons is that they know that phishing detection has gotten so well when it comes to detecting websites that impersonate other brands, so they kind of want to evade this detection mechanism. The question that may arise here is, why would actually anyone fall for these websites and buy something from them? They have some aspects that make people think like it's a legitimate website, such as having well-defined theme, showing up at search results, unlike phishing that they try to hide from crawlers, and having valid payment gateways. So when people see this valid payment processor, they may think that it's legitimate, and even the attacker later receives the money from these payment processors, and they don't get users' credit card information. Continuing on the difference of this website with phishing, we all know that phishing detection is so advanced in the web ecosystem, and major web browsers have anti-phishing that users heavily rely on. But unfortunately, it's not the same for fraudulent e-commerce websites. And this is because this phishing detection basically relies on the similarity and familiarity of the malicious websites with the authentic website. And knowing that these websites are not as much studied as phishing, there are some limitations that hold back large-scale analysis, like what we've seen for phishing, such as there is no up-to-date, publicly available data set, and collecting data is a hard task because it's time-consuming, and it requires expert knowledge. Another limitation is that there are some previous work in this area, but those work are very specific to just one category of this fraudulent e-commerce website, and it's not applicable for other categories. And finally, there isn't any ecosystem-level understanding of these websites. Based on limitation of prior works in this research, we want to answer three main questions. We want to know how can we come up with a large-scale data set of fraudulent e-commerce website, and having the data, what are those unique attributes that can help us distinguish these websites from legitimate websites, and how effective are the current defense systems to protect users when it comes to fraudulent e-commerce website. To answer this question, we start by solving the data problem. We leverage social media platform Reddit, where there's a subreddit called r/scams that users post some suspicious URLs, emails, or calls and ask whether they are fraudulent or legitimate, or sometimes they also share their experiment there. We use this user's comment on each post to automate our labeling process for each URL, and at the same time save other information of the site, such as who is information, HTML source, and their social media information. Overall, we collect data of 2.5 years and end up with about 85,000 online sites, out of which 2,300 are legitimate and 6,100 are fraudulent websites. Then we want to understand what are the categories of fake websites that we have in our collected data. So we look at the source code of our data, and here in the table, you can see all the categories along with their percentage. Now that we have the data, we want to find those features, those unique features that can help us detect these websites. Continuing on phishing, common features that when it comes to detecting phishing are not capable here, such as URL similarities, or existence of logos of brands or organizations, and existence of forms. So we have to come up with new features that would help us in our domain. When we dig deeper, we understand that social media is something that users rely on to discover brands, and websites add links of their social media account to their websites to kind of give them authority. So as more and more legitimate websites add these social media logos, fraudulent websites also add these logos to their websites. But they may not necessarily point to a valid social media account, such as the example that we can see here. All these logos are available in the websites, but none of them is actually a link to the social media account of the business. And we actually believe that's because they want to avoid their identity being revealed and shared by victims on social media. Even for those websites that actually have a social media account, like to put up a facade, and once they think that their identity might have been revealed, they would come up with another account. It's important to check the credibility of this social media by looking at the number of their followers. How long ago those accounts have been created, and the number of likes they have on their page. Another finding that we have is this website historically tend to have very low prices that are too good to be true, to kind of attract users. But in newer trends, we see that they offer reasonable prices. We believe this is because they want to blend with legitimate websites, and having low prices would make people skeptical, and a reasonable price is more likely to they would end up with more money. Having all this observation, we end up with this list of features. If you're interested to learn more, please read the paper. Now that we have the features, we trained a neural network-based classifier. We evaluated other classifiers, but the neural network-based is best in our evaluation, so that's what we refer to in our talk. We have the model. We want to know how effective our model is in real-world scenario, where the data that it have never seen before. So we do 2 experiments. In the first one, because of the very little available ground truth for fraudulent e-commerce websites, we rely on crowdsourcing. We create a Reddit bot that monitor our scam subreddit for 14 months. And our Reddit bot would post a comment on submissions that contain URL. Overall, 2,000 posts have been posted by our Reddit bot that would say what's the classifier's predicted label. Then we ask users to give us feedback whether they agree with the predicted label or not. Overall, we receive about 14,000 responses from 8,000 unique users. Here is an example of the Reddit bot where the posted URL has predicted as not legitimate. Users can click either of this link to tell us whether it's correct or not. Having the feedbacks that users provided, we achieved the accuracy of 98%. Then, again, another data that has never seen and even not labeled by us, we collaborate with Palo Alto Networks and test our model on 23K data, roughly 50% fraudulent, 50% legitimate data. In this experiment, we achieved a true positive rate of 94%, which means we identified fraudulent e-commerce websites correctly, while misclassifying 2.5%. Remember this red error message that users get when it comes to visiting a phishing website? We want to answer our third question and know how these mitigation systems are effective and if they are protecting users against fraudulent e-commerce websites. So we check our data against Google Safe Browsing, and they only detect 25 of our data. What does this tell us about the ecosystem? Like in our work, we show one path to detecting these websites at scale, and we know it's feasible. It's telling us that hosting providers and security companies should take actions and protect users against this kind of threats quickly. Thank you for listening to my presentation. We make the code and data available today through this link. If you have any question, I can take your question.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. If there are questions, please feel free to use the microphone while people are still thinking. I do have a couple of questions. You have 3 examples in your presentation, all of which are still working, right? So Boho Live still works, and the fake Jersey site still works. Have you kind of taken any steps to report these websites, for example, to safe browsing to see if they react at all?
To safe browsing, we haven't reported to safe browsing, but we have reported them to, like, if they are hosted with one of like the e-commerce systems, that we have reported to them, or we have reported to other companies that we're partnering with. But with Google Safe Browsing, my feeling is that it's not something that is supposed to detect this kind of website at scale. Like, it's kind of an emerging cybercrime, so maybe they're just not looking at it yet.
And then kind of related to this a little bit, right now your assumption is that these websites are malicious, right? They're fraudulent.
Yeah.
Have you tried, or do you believe what the people are posting on Reddit?
Sorry, I think...
Have you tried to buy a jersey and then not get it? Or do you believe... So the reasoning behind this question is, if I now go to Reddit and say, oh, this website is scam, right? You end up having a site that is not actually scam in your data.
So this subreddit has several active moderators that moderate those subreddit, and like, even if they not only they monitor submissions but also comments. If they think some of actually the criminals would comment that it's legit, they would just delete that. So it's actively being monitored by those moderators. But we haven't tried to purchase anything yet. But it's like ongoing research.
Right, thank you. Another question here?
Great talk. I was curious, did you notice like these, how do these scam websites, they appear in terms of like search results, or like do they, because they would want to get themselves noticed, but obviously they would have to manipulate the search engine ranking. So like, I was curious, what would how they are ranked in the overall, because there are these big players of those products, and what's their visibility outside?
Like they do. When we tried like different, at the beginning of the project, we tried different methods to collect data, and we see that they show up in search results. Some of them also like show up in the ads of the search results. So that's the main way that they gain visibility.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I hate to cut this very interesting discussion off, but we need to move on to the next speaker. Thank you very much again.